Hello, my fellow friends, my fellow neighbors, and my fellow
Greetings.
shining stars. You know where you are at when you see the next trolley stop.
Oh, my.
Welcome to a very
Yes.
special episode number 9 of the Empowered Publicity Shining Star series. Thank you very much for spending some of your time with us, wherever you are and wherever you may be. We are approaching just the final few days of the month of May, but the summer has very much begun. We are in full swing with the summer, so we appreciate all of you spending some time with us here in our neighborhood, here at Empowered Publicity this week. My name is Jonathan Masiulionis, the president here at Empowered Publicity. This isn't just any old trolley stop here today and this week. It is a very special trolley stop. Of course, all of you, our friends and neighbors and our shining stars at Empowered Publicity, all of just everyone who has supported Empowered Publicity for the past 6 years knows the very special bond that we have in our heart for Mr. Rogers and Mr. Rogers' neighborhood. And it very much is an honor and a privilege and a blessing to be custodians of the neighborhood in our own way here at Empowered Publicity. And several months ago, we had the blessing and the good fortune of interviewing David Newell, Mr. McFeely from Mr. Rogers' neighborhood. And this is, I will tell you, friends and neighbors, I've had the opportunities to interview in one night, I remember, in a past life it seems, but when I hosted the award-winning Monday Night Mayhem Wrestling radio show, and one night I interviewed Hulk Hogan and the Nature Boy Ric Flair. And I was excited for those interviews. Those were fantastic. But this is, in the near 20 years I've done interviews, this is atop the list. We have been so excited for many months now to share the release, one of the most anticipated, beautiful memoirs, books overall of 2020. It is now available, courtesy of our friends at Catapult, the publishing company with the most amazing name, by the way, Catapult.
Catapult. I agree.
The brand new release, Officer Clemmons, a memoir. It is now available at Amazon, your favorite bookstores across the country and around the world. Grammy Award-winning singer and one of the beloved stars of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. He is our favorite officer. He's one of our favorite neighbors. Dr. Francois Clemmons joining us here this week on the Shining Stars series. Francois, extremely grateful for your time. We've had several conversations. It kind of took some time for all this to happen, but I believe that the greatest things happen in life with patience. And so thank you for spending some time with us here in our neighborhood this week. We really appreciate it.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thank you for the invitation, to you and to all of your friends who listen to you. And also, I have to say, the very first time I became aware of you, certainly was at least a year ago. And the thing that I felt was this deep communication. And if anything, it's gotten deeper, but not any less, that this man is committed. He has a knowledge for the kind of work you're doing and for the people that you embrace when you reach out. I admire you and your work. And that's why I tell you all the time to post your stuff on my page, and it's easy for me to just go on Facebook and read and listen. I don't always listen to it straight through. I'll come back and get, this and back like that. But it's like somebody ought to have a collection of these presentations that you do, because they have a special flavor and a special place in the world. And I'm sure people benefit a great, great deal from having been exposed to you and meet you and to know you.
Those words, my heart just opened very wide. So this is going to be an even more heart-filled conversation.
Amen.
There's so much for us to talk about. I think that the perfect way, before we kind of go back to your youth, I think it's always great to start things in the present moment and just talk to our friends, talk to our neighbors, talk to our listeners and viewers about this response that you've had from this book. Because one of the beautiful things I admire about you, Francois, is that now more than ever you are your authentic self. And there's no hiding. And people are embracing you. They're loving you. And there is this global hug. Even though we haven't been hugging in the way in which we used to, there's been this virtual hug around the world that you've been given as people are learning more about not only your time on the neighborhood, but your life prior to the neighborhood, as well as a little bit after the neighborhood. What has that experience and feeling been like to share your story right now at this point in time in your life?
Well, first of all, I have to say I had no idea. I could not have anticipated how wonderful it was going to be. I just simply didn't have that file on the computer. I didn't think it would be a negative throwaway, but I had no idea. It's been literally overwhelming. I get lots more fan mail, emails. They try to send me texts, which I find a week or two later, I don't really text. So when I click on that, they say, oh, you got some text. I say, oh, I do. But I have really felt that this book was coming, because as I say in the book, I have a unique perspective, and I had to have faith that that unique perspective was just as legitimate as someone else from a different background, maybe more similar to Fred's, and they can talk about things that he knew and worked through in his life. But when I speak with him and when I spend time with Fred, he was never hungry at night when he had to go to bed. He was never beaten by his parents. So he could trust. I had a very big trust issue. He had the nice little suits and ties, and he dressed up. I had one pair of pants. And sometimes if they got dirty, I'd have to come home and wash them out and hang them up myself. And then I had to iron them the next morning. Hopefully they would be dry enough. I didn't have to get into them when they were still wet. Those were things of lack and loss, and also to be beaten by your parents. That was the hardest thing for me to write about, the fact that they bruised me. They beat me so badly. And I was trying to be obedient. I was trying very, very hard to be obedient, and it did not work. And I began to realize that the issue was not obedience, it was survival. Was I going to survive this onslaught? Because my stepfather, in my opinion, was getting worse and worse and worse in his physical abuse. He was also mentally abusive, you know, and other subtle ways that were, it was very difficult. And my faith in God, my awareness of divinity all the time, and turning to the music that my great-grandmother and grandmother had sung to me, that music gave me consolation. And that consolation was profound. And I learned that pretty early on, like 9, 10, something is happening here. The universe does hear me. It does respond. It does love me. My parents may not, but something does, whatever that is. And one of the ways it was demonstrated is I would be at home and I say, I really need a new pair of shoes. Winter is coming in. I don't have a job, and I don't want to go to school with my feet wet and cold like that. I can't do that. And someone, the neighbors at the church or in the community center that we went to, somebody would say, Francois, what size shoe do you wear? I said, 7, 8, whatever it was at the time. All right, well, I have something for you before you leave today. You come back around my office just by yourself. And I would go back there to the office afterwards, and they had purchased a pair of shoes for me. I got a winter coat that way. They saw. When you look around, people say, oh, there's nothing I can do. I don't know what to do. Look around. Somebody missed a meal today. Somebody is wearing a pair of shoes that this is the last pair. Somebody hasn't changed their pants in 4 or 5 days. There is something you can do. We are not helpless. We have been told how to serve. And it's so basic. Where's the widow? Where's the old man? Where are the children who are without love and nurturing and caring? There. Well, how about that? When I was in New York, I started responding to a young boy who knocked at the door of my house and in the apartment building. And the noise was strange, the way he was scratching. And I went in, I opened the door, and I looked like this, and I didn't see anybody, so I closed it. And it started again. I said, what is this? So I went to the door, and lo and behold, I looked down, and it was a little child with a sippy cup. And that little child, all he did was hand it up to me like this. And I said, are you hungry? Okay, give me the cup. He was a toddler. So I went in the kitchen, the door was wide open. I got some milk and I put it in the sippy cup and I brought it back and I gave it to him. He drank the whole thing. I mean, he literally, I said, child, you must have really been hungry. And then he gave it to me again. feed my people. You say there's nothing to do? Oh, yes, there is. So I went, and when I was going to get him the second cup of milk, I heard a woman coming down the hall, very aggressive, very abrasive. I knew right away that I didn't want to know her. I didn't want to have anything to do with her because her vibration was not mine. So evidently, as it turns out, she was the mother to this little boy. And this little boy became my first cosmic son because that experience taught him that if he came to my door, I would feed him. And I began to shop differently. I began to think, my feeling about myself was so different. And she was the kind of woman who I said, you know, you have a wonderful son. He seems to like me very much. He came to my house and he keeps coming back. She said, go on, take him. I don't care. I don't, just bring him back home at night. You're not supposed to be gone. Bring him home. Hello. So we went in and I fixed up a little space that I had in the apartment. I had a bedroom and a space and the bathroom and the kitchen. And this was really, this area was for an overnight guest. It had a single, single bed there. And I gave that to him. And he began to stay with me all the time. I took him shopping. I took him out to restaurants. I took him to the Metropolitan Opera. We traveled to Pittsburgh. He got to meet Mr. Rogers. I took him to Ohio. My mother was still alive and my sisters. And this thing that I had felt, in the book I talk about wanting to nurture a child, he fulfilled it. And he took that first step. And I began to realize that when I was traveling to California or New Orleans or somewhere to sing, I was thinking about him. How was he being taken care of? Was he getting enough to eat? Were he getting his clothes so he could wear them and be warm and like all of that? I said, well, that's a mother. I'm concerned about what's happening even when I'm gone. So I had some friends who I could get very easily to make sure that they would ask his mother. And she always said yes, because she wanted to go get high. She didn't want anything to do with the responsibility of that young child. So he grew up. I sent him to Catholic school for a while. And I would have continued. It was a great, great, great shock to me when the mother was basically arrested for drugs and all that stuff, and her boyfriends and whatever. And his grandparents said, because the social worker was a friend of mine, I knew her. She said, Francois, do you want him to take care of him? I said, well, this is his second home, and I'm certainly spending money that a parent would spend. She said, okay, but you're going to have to fight for him. I said, fight for him? What do you mean? She said, his grandparents say they don't want a gay person raising him. I said, a gay person? A gay person has done what nobody else would do for him. What are you talking about? She said, they have first rights in New York State. And you'd have to really, hire a good lawyer. It's going to cost you an arm and a leg. And then we would back you. We have decided. So the social agency agreed that they would back me. And it was very tragic to me. I went into a deep depression when I realized legally there was nothing I could do. So I gave him up. But that opened the door for the other kids in the neighborhood who flocked in. Lord have mercy. There were so many things that we shared, and I felt I'm where I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to be doing this. And I've been feeling something in there ever since I was in my 20s, I guess. Then when I came to Middlebury College, and this kept up. In New York, I have 25, 30 cosmic cheering. I call them cheering. When I came here, I discovered the poor little rich kids. They were not all rich, of course, but they were not of the classes, gentlemen. They weren't going to bed hungry here, but they were hungry for someone who really cared about them, someone who wrapped their arms around them and said, I love you. This place was so afraid of sexual harassment, and I don't think that they were unwise, but I'm sorry that cut so deeply into the behavior of the campus. And I was absolutely an exception. And they said it more than once, you're so lucky that you can be yourself, Francois, because these kids need what you're offering. But I could never do that. It would not allow me. The atmosphere, the social atmosphere would not permit me to say, I love this girl, I love this boy. and have a healthy relationship as a professor. So I opened my heart, my house. Lord have mercy, those children. And the thing that I love, I'm at a certain age now, and some of them in their 30s, you know, I've been here 20-something years. And when they come and they take me out to lunch or dinner, they won't let me pay for it. That's the big difference. I say, oh, yeah, I paid for it all while you were in school, wherever we went. They said, I'm working now. I'm a lawyer. I'm a nurse. I'm a singer. I'm an electrician. I'm an architect, and I'm paying now. It's the most, I sat there. One boy was conducting The Beauty and the Beast in Boston, and he sent me tickets and plane tickets and everything. So I flew to Boston, and I went to the theater. A buddy of mine went with me, and from the minute he walked out on the in the pit to get to the podium to conduct, I started crying. I must have cried the whole first half. No. The whole first half of the show. I don't know what was going on stage. And they said, why were you crying? I said, because I saw my boy was now a man, not a boy anymore. He took command. He made me so proud, so proud. And that's what they give back to me. And I said, they said, well, why do you do it? Why do you do this? Why do you do that? There were so many things, and I talk about them in the book, where I took the kids down in New York, I took them to Boston, I took them to Philadelphia. There were many outings that I would, if we didn't squeeze into my car, I rented a van. And they would say, why do you do so much more than any other teacher, Mr. Clemmons? I've never had this kind of a relationship with a professor. And I looked at him and I told him, I do it because that's what daddies do. If I'm going to be daddy, I'm called upon in a certain way. And I said, it was given to me by Mr. Rogers, unconditional love. And it made all the difference in my life. And you deserve the same thing. So it's a legacy coming from granddaddy to me, and now it's your turn. I'll do everything I can to help you. And when you need someone, I am there. And I meant it.
So beautiful. There's so many things that we're going to be sharing throughout our time together here on the Shining Star series, especially, of course, your time on The Neighborhood. I did want to talk especially a little bit now, if we could, about your early life and the connection that you had with your grandfather. Your grandfather introduced you to singing, and your voice has helped to open up the hearts and the minds and souls of children, parents, families, everyone, you name it, people of all ages, races, ethnicities, nationalities. Talk to our friends and neighbors, talk to our listeners and viewers about the relationship that you had with your grandfather, and really how that really laid the foundation for the rest of your life, and how really he helped to inspire your work on what would be the neighborhood. Yes.
My grandfather was trying to give me a self-evaluation that was positive, rather than what I ran into a lot from the time I started school in Ohio, is that a lot of people underestimated what I was feeling or what I was capable of. They never asked me, they just made certain assumptions, even as to what I should be doing, the level of work. I was an honor roll student, and I worked very hard. I studied. I found that if I studied, I learned, okay. So that was very, very, very important to me. My grandfather gave me that sense of, you can do it. Something about his unconditional love, taking me fishing in the morning, and we became a team. He and I would wake up in the morning, whoever got up first, come looking for the other. And sometimes he'd be sitting outside with the chickens and the guinea fowl and the ducks, whatever. And I would come over and join him, and he would be talking to the to the chickens, and I talked to them too. And I thought that was so funny. And my family teased me about that. Yeah, they're talking to them chickens, boy. They don't know what you're talking about. And my grandfather said, Saul, stop teaching that boy that stuff. This was my grandmother's response, and my great-grandmother too. So anyway, I went with him. He had rheumatism, and his joints ached, he said, and he had a cane, so he walked with the cane. and I would hold on to his hand or his pants. There's a hook sometimes on the side of his overalls. And I remember holding on to that hook. And we would go down to the creek, and he had somewhere stashed a bamboo type pole, you know, with string that or whatever for hook, line, and sinker, all that stuff. And he'd put that together, and we would sit down, and we would just look at the little lake, the creek, and see how much fish we could catch. He was a very good fisherman, by the way. We often came home with a string of fish for dinner. But there were times when I was with him and everything was quiet, and all of a sudden this cane would start talking and singing. And it was a very unusual voice. Carry on, little boy. Little boy, you better be good and listen to your granddaddy and your mama and your great-grandmama too. Yeah, I've been watching you, little boy. You're gonna grow up to be a fine, fine fellow. God's gonna bless you. God's gonna bless you, my boy. I said, Granddaddy, is that's the cane talk? He said, yes, that's the cane. He's telling you you're gonna grow up to be a good boy, a big boy, and you have to pay attention. Oh, I loved it when the cane sang like that and talked to me. So I went back to home with him and everything. And I said to my older brother, listen, did you know that the cane could sing and even talk? He said, oh no, that's just Granddaddy talking to you because you're so gullible. He didn't use that word, but that's what he said. So then I asked my mother, and she said, child, that cane is not talking. That's Daddy. That's Saul, who was her father. And he's just talking. I'm going to make him stop telling you that cane can talk. It cannot. So I went to my room where I slept with my brother. And I remember saying to myself, we have a secret. Nobody else has heard the cane but me and Granddaddy. That proved to be such a bond that between us, and we sometimes catch each other's eye and wink. He would wink, and the knowledge or the thought that I had a secret with my Granddaddy was it just was so fulfilling. He and I had a secret, and so we have to go off by ourselves. So because the cane didn't want them to hear what we were talking about, what we were saying, and of course I tell the story that when the rains came and we were forced off of this plantation, we headed east and north. And so you get from Mississippi, New Orleans to Mississippi on your way to Alabama. And we didn't know anybody. There was no halfway house. There was no Red Cross. There was no team of Army specialists or anybody coming out to stop the water. And you know, Katrina flooded everything. It was over the top of many houses because of the way New Orleans was at a lower level than the sea level. And the same thing happened that time. Every 25, 30 years, they say, here comes another one. Also, there's a whole metaphysical thing about how we abuse the Mississippi River, and we're using it in a way that's not ecologically sound or thoughtful. So Mother Nature would come in and say, get out. Just everybody, get out. I'm tired of y'all. And she would start brushing everything down the river into the Caribbean. They have to come back so stupid and they start all over again because it doesn't allow the river to flood like the Nile used to flood in biblical times. This Mississippi would flood and there'd be rich land for farming and stuff. Well, they built houses on all that stuff. And she couldn't, and practically built a city going all the way down to New Orleans. Well, when she got through, there was nothing else there. So we wound up in, on the way, my grandfather Saul could not keep up. And we found a place for him to sit on the back of somebody's wagon who had some oxen drawing that wagon. So for a while he kept up. And then it seems like, I don't know when it happened, but suddenly he wasn't on the wagon. And one of my older cousins, uncles, they went back. Thank God they found him the first time. And he was just sitting on the side in the water with all the rattlesnakes and the frogs and whatever else. It was a harrowing experience to me. And they brought him back up. And I heard them admonishing him. Now you have to stay on the wagon. You're too old. You can't walk. So stay on the wagon. We can't be with you all the time, because the crowd was growing. It was massive because everybody was trying to, everybody. So we go on another 2 or 3 miles. I can't tell you because I was so young. But I remember when the sound went up, he was gone. Where's Granddaddy Saul? And so a bunch of them went back again. And after a while, they came back and said, we can't find it. We've asked people, we've looked everywhere, and I lost it. Oh, where's my granddaddy? Where's my granddaddy? And they reached out and said, somebody found this cane. This was his cane. I grabbed the cane. I said, oh, my granddaddy, my granddaddy. And I went into grief. I grieved. And I remember, because I talked to my mother about it, she said, you grieved like an adult. And we didn't think that was healthy for you. It was too sad. So they took the cane away from, and when they took the cane, hello, give me a water, hey, hey, I'm telling you now, give me my cane. And they looked at me. I said, boy, where did you get that music from? Where you come singing that? We ain't never heard that before. I said, that's me in the cane. That was our secret. And they were trying to stifle that. They said, no, that's not the cane. What do you make? I said, well, Granddaddy and the cane. They said, Saul was singing to this boy, that's all. So after a while, I began to sing by myself, and they allowed me. They left me alone, because that's the only time I found solace thinking about my grandfather. And I would walk around singing words, make believe. They weren't logical, and I don't know what he was singing about, except every now and then he would admonish me to be a good boy. And it was a little bit after that, believe it or not, before I realized that was Granddaddy singing. It was not the cane. And I love the fact that I could allow myself, to be naive enough to have that childhood experience with me and my grandfather. And so I always think of him and my great grandmother when I sing. The sound that I give to you is the sound they gave to me. And so they're a part of every concert, especially my great grandmother, because I used to hold on to her dress in the kitchen while she was walking around trying to cook. And so music has been there ever since then, and it's very, very important to me. And I'm very happy that I had the early childhood education in Youngstown, where my teachers in 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th grade always said, well, Francois, come over here. We're going to put this program together, and we want you to sing this song. And sometimes they would teach me a song, and sometimes they say, what is one of your church songs that you sing? And I would tell them, and do you have something happier or different for this occasion, whatever. And then I would try to think of another one. And I wound up, everybody in the school knew that I could sing. I was the star singer in that school. And what I found is a certain measure of profound love and affection from several of my teachers. They understood the pain that had produced this, but they also understood it was a musical gift, and they were going to exploit it to the max. So whenever there was a Thanksgiving or Christmas show, oh holy night, we gather together to ask the Lord blessings, Thanksgiving, and they found something. And they did plays in the auditorium for, we dress up little hats and like pilgrims sometimes. And I remember that I was supposed to step forward and sing something. And I didn't step forward. And my teacher had to actually come over and it was like I was in a trance. I knew I was supposed to sing, and I could, but I was standing there, and my mind was somewhere else. And I remember her pulling me out and saying, "This is what you have to do." And everybody understood, everybody. So I stood there, and then I sang my song. And when I got through, she said, "Okay, you can go back." So music has always been there, always. Every teacher I've ever had knew that one over there had a voice. He can sing. I could also sing harmony. I love to sing harmony.
The vulnerability that you share, not only in that, which you of course talk about so beautifully in your memoir, but the vulnerability in which you share all facets of your life. I felt as I was reading your memoir that there was an exceptional amount of healing that you had. Maybe, and it's interesting because when it comes to healing, sometimes, one of my favorite movies of all time is Shrek, with Mike Myers and Eddie Murphy, and there's a scene between Shrek and Donkey, and he says, "Donkey, ogres are like onions. Ogres have ogres have layers and onions have layers." So when it comes to our healing, we have that layer where it's like, all right, now we finally got there, and then several months later, several years later, maybe you're slightly triggered, whatever the case might be. How much healing did you experience looking back on all aspects of your life? You talk about how you were able to forgive your father, you were able to forgive your stepfather, you were able to forgive your mother, and
my mother.
And that's huge. And I think that that's something that many people are struggling with, especially right now. Could you talk to our listeners or friends?
I was with Fred all the time at that time, and he meditated. He swam in the morning, and he kept solemn quietness to himself. Right. And because of that, I decided to start meditating and discovered what a jewel it was to be quiet, Francois. Just be quiet and let the universe talk to me. And so I did, and something inside of me changed. And I found that I was mostly healing myself. I later on, I took a Reiki course and laying on of hands and all that kind of stuff. So I feel that healing is an incredibly important component of my outreach, of my anointment, my gift. And I actually discovered it when I was pretty young, because my Aunt Cora, my Aunt Hattie, my Aunt Emma, my Aunt, who did I leave out? Anyway, there's another one, Aunt Bess. They used to say to me, "Come here, boy." I was young, 7, 6. "Put your hand right here." And I put my little hand there. And they say, "Oh, Lord have mercy, that feels so good. You have the gift of touch, don't you?" I said, She said, "Well, you do." And then another one, Aunt Claire said, "Come over here, boy." And she put her knee there. "Put your hand there on your auntie's knee." And I put my hand on her knee. Ooh, she said, "Thank God." Oh, what a child. What a child. Bless you. Bless you. Thank you. So I discovered when I was 6, 7 years old, that if I did that, they were having back trouble, I put both of my hands on their back. I didn't think anything about it. I thought I can help, my aunt, my beloved, I loved them almost like mothers. And so when they called me and said, "Come over here, boy," and I would go and lay my hands on whatever of their body that they were struggling with, having pain. And they said it would go away. I've discovered, since I took the course in Reiki back in the middle 78, 79, I knew I could heal. I had healing in my hands for my own body. And when I got the group, the Harlem Spiritual Ensemble, I used to give them healing energy all the time, because we were on the road. We didn't want to go see necessarily a doctor. And sometimes music was difficult. You're tired. You don't want to go out and sing another concert. And so what do? I would give them Reiki. But my Reiki was touching, and it's love. You're giving the love energy. And so that, I almost went to Kent State when I was in high school. There was a part of me that knew that I had the gift and knew that I wanted to do it. And I said, well, let me at least apply. So I applied to Kent State. I got a full scholarship. And they had a degree for healing, musical healing. And Oberlin called at me a little stronger, a little harder. And that's why I didn't take that course at Kent State and get a degree in musical therapy. But what I discovered is it stayed with me all through college. And you know how sometimes you're talking to one of your friends and you start giving them a back rub or something. They always said, "Oh, what are you doing?" You know, that's how I discovered that I could do it. And I let it flow. It's everywhere. Anybody. I feel deeply, deeply grateful that I can give that.
I'm so glad that you shared the full circle experience that you had, because, you know, one of the things that we're starting to learn, especially with what's happening amidst the current climate, is that not only is life short, not only is life precious, but holding on to grudges and ill will is just pointless and makes sense. So we encourage all of our friends and neighbors, our listeners and viewers who are tuning in to this month's edition, I should say, of the Publicity Shining Star series to take a page out of Francois' book, that it is possible to be able to forgive your mother or your father or whoever it is that you may have any sort of hatred or bitterness to. Again, the brand new release we are sharing here on the Empowered Publicity Shining Star series, I should say. We're going to be talking about children's books, I'm sure, during the course of our time here together, here in our neighborhood visit with Dr. Francois Clemmons. The brand new release available courtesy of our friends and neighbors at Catapult Books. Again, Officer Clemmons. A Memoir is now available. While at Amazon, by the way, feel free to leave your 5-star review for Francois.
Yes, I noticed that.
If you feel guided to do so. The relationship that you had, of course, that many people know, with our favorite friend and neighbor. He's here with us, of course. You know, we talked about this before we began our time recording here. You classify the relationship that you have with Fred, with Mr. Rogers, as mentor, fan, and surrogate father. There was a bond. There was a bond of unconditional love, something that probably cannot be described into words. But I think I'm getting into a question where I may ask you to put that into words. So could you talk to us about the first time where you met Fred, and really when you knew that there was something very special between you two?
When I saw him at church, at Third Presbyterian Church, I had won a job. I sung for the organist, and he chose me to come in and be his tenor soloist. And he played while I was singing. I did If With All Your Hearts from Elijah. I'm not sure what else I sang, but I know I did that. There was a period of time when I did it all the time. So there I was. He said, "Can you sing a spiritual for me?" I said, "I certainly can." So I launched into a spiritual. And don't you know, he sat there and went beep, 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 beep. And the next thing you know, he was accompanying me on the piano. He had such a gift. Well, that was a wonderful guy to work for. He thoroughly understood me. He gave me spirituals to sing and other kinds of contributions to the service. And so Easter was coming around by the time we got there. And I said, "You know, John, I have a program that I've been thinking about and putting together of the Stations of the Cross. And during those stations, I sing American Negro spirituals. And it's comparable to lessons and carols at Christmas time. Would you like to hear or think about a program like that I could do here, maybe like Good Friday?" And he said, "Good Friday? We don't usually bring the choir in and stuff." He said, "What? Tell me more about this." So I just explained that to him, you know, where Pilate washes his hands, and he never said a mumbling word. And were you there? And the last one is the angels rolled the stone away. So I gave him this list. We began to put it together. He said, "I love this idea. This is unique. It was nobody else had ever done it that we knew of." And so I practiced, talked to the minister. We got the biblical passages together. And sure enough, that Good Friday, I came to Third Presbyterian Church. And so soon enough, we started. Well, it just went so well, I'm telling you, that at the end, when I sang, "The angels rolled the stone away," well, the angels rolled the stone away, was on that Easter Sunday morning, when the angels rolled stone away. The angels roll the stone away. The angels roll the stone away. Oh, it's on that Easter Sunday morning when the angels roll that stone away. So that was the end of it. And I just stood there. Not a sound. And so I just stood there. And finally the organist got up and he came over. He's back there and I'm up here. And he put his arm around me and the people literally stood up. Everybody. No, it was not the kind of thing where you clap. And I agreed with them. So what did they do? They lined up, all 200 of them. And came up. I spent over an hour there signing autographs, programs, and having people tell me their love for me and for this music and the experience that we'd had together that day. It was so powerful. Well, when all of that was over and they were gone, who standing over there by the pews was Fred Rogers. And he's a plain man. He's not a colorful or ostentatious human being. He's very internal, introverted. And there was something about the way he's standing there that I wouldn't just walk away and say, well, shit, he's taking too long. So I waited. Finally, he walked over to me and he said, it was the most wonderful, wonderful Good Friday service he's ever had in his whole life. And he said, I'm deeply, deeply moved by your singing and how you give from your heart. And what a gift, he said. I'd like to get to know you a little better. Maybe we could get together sometime or invite me when you're singing. I think he actually gave me a business card and said, when you're singing somewhere around Carnegie Mellon and all, please give me an invitation. I'll be very happy to come. And his wife and John showed up at that point and said, no, you guys should plan a day to go to lunch now. Let's plan it. So they took over and made, a date that I wasn't busy and all that. We were going to meet at Stouffer's. I knew where it was. I had never been there before, but I knew where it was. So we all arranged to meet at Stouffer's. We were sitting down and had our I had like a Shirley Temple, something, because I can't drink in the daytime. So I had something. And then finally, John and Joanne said, all right, I'm leaving. I have something to do. I knew that I just wanted to make sure you two got off to a good start. And John made his excuses. And next, I'm sitting there alone with this almost stranger. And he started asking me questions. And I knew right away that he had an interest, a real interest. There had been something in his eyes at the Good Friday service, and I saw that re-emerging. And that quality is very warm, very loving, and it's like he can look inside and see the real me. And so I was suspicious, and I was reluctant, and I was thinking, well, what is this? Why is he looking so intensely? I write in the book that he hugged me without touching me. Because as we continued, he asked questions, and I talked. He's the introvert, I'm the extrovert. He listened, and I never stopped talking. That's my comparison of our relationship. He really wanted to know about things that I'd had in my life that they were foreign to him. And also bitter. It was bitterness and brutality. And he wanted to know how I had survived it. And essentially, the only thing I could tell him at that time was, I believe in God. God saved me. Some presence that was looking over me and told me when to say yes and when to say no. Because then I began to turn to strangers outside of my family. And sometimes they would say, do you want to go to a concert? Do you want to come and have dinner or something? And I might have been suspicious, but I said, God, you sent that person. I don't have to be suspicious of her. I don't have to be suspicious of him. And I was always right. So when I saw Fred, I was thinking, he seems like he's interested in me. I wonder what this is all about. And what he basically said is, I would like to have you come on my television program. I would love to hear you sing a couple of your spirituals that you sang there, and we'll get an accompanist for you. Or you can bring someone and let us know, and we'll pay them. But come, let me take you down to the station. He took me to WQED. And when I walked in, you know, I was wide-eyed like a saucer's, because I'd never been in a recording television studio. And I felt very much out of place. So we walked in and we saw the castle and the tree where X the Owl and Henrietta Pussycat are. We saw the museum. You know, it was all set up, but nobody was there. Next thing you know, he walks over and reaches behind one of the sets. I don't remember which one. And he takes out a little suitcase, you know, like so. And he opens it up and he takes out what I know now to be King Friday. And he starts talking. The puppet starts talking. I was shocked. And then he takes out Queen Sarah. And so he's doing her and they're talking to each other. Then they're talking to me. You know, I don't do this. This is not what men do. I was so culturally out of it, out of that picture. Why is this grown man playing with these toys, these babies, puppets and dolls? And he was serious though. He never apologized and he never was too aggressive. He just kept putting them down and taking up X. And then he put that down, he'd take up Henrietta, put that down, you know, and take up Daniel the Tiger. So he would take those up and each one of them would talk to me. And I didn't know what to say. So finally he said, well, he explained, these are the puppets that I use on the program. And some of them go all the way back to when I was young. And now they have become a source of expression where I can talk about some things with our children in the audience. And maybe things that I might not be as comfortable saying. The puppet can say it. Oh. That was a profound way of thinking. Ultimately, I got very comfortable because I always talked to him. Mm-hmm. Even if it was Queen Sarah, and Lady Elaine, whoever, I was really talking to him. I never got to the point where I personified the puppets in a way that some people I know who worked with us that seemed to have a deep connection. My connection was with him. The one that came the closest was Daniel Tiger because he was so sweet and helpless. He needed help. And I would have wanted to help Daniel. But I liked them, but I didn't feel that thing that many of the other people did. So we went upstairs. I met a wonderful staff that he had for him there helping him. They were wonderful people. And then he said, okay, now come back and see us sometime, Francois. We'd love to see you. I said, okay, thank you, bye. So for me, it was over. Well, a week or so later, I get a phone call. You know how we used to have those tape recorders that, you know, they were used as answering machines.
Correct.
And I came back to the apartment and there was a message from him. And it was really admonishing me. How come you haven't come to see me? We've been waiting over here looking for you. I said, what? I kind of fluffed it off. I said, well, I don't have time now. He called me again. And it was the same kind of gentle nudging, serious nudging. Where are you? What are you doing that you can't come by the studio? Lady Elaine's been asking about you. King Friday. I was not on that place. So I finally called him back and I said, Mr. Rogers, this is Francois. Well, you finally got back to me. He said, when are you coming over to see? Right to it. I said, but I'm in school. You don't have any time? I said, yeah, well, yes, I do. Well, when can you come over to see us? He nailed me down. So I went back over there again, and this time they were filming, and I sat on the sides, of course, and I began to think, oh, well, maybe I can just be there in the lights and what have you and sing, and not, it won't be too terrible. I don't want anything to do with those puppets, though. So they had me come in the part where it's reality to his, you know, where he puts his coat in the closet. I came there first. And so I was very comfortable and I sang. After that first day of filming, I did 2 shows and 4 songs, 2 songs on each. He said he got mail 3 or 4 days, 5 days, whatever, and phone calls. People wanted to know, who is that singer? He was wonderful and we enjoyed him so much. Are you going to have him on again? So he was calling me and I talked to him and he said, would you please be on my program and come into our neighborhood? We'd love to have you come. And I remember I said one of the dumbest things under the sun, God's sun here on this earth. I said, Mr. Rogers, I would be very happy to come to your program as long as it doesn't interfere with my music. Every time I think about it, that's so dumb. That was the most naive thing. And you know what he told me? He said, Francois, that was the moment that I knew I loved you. There was something about you. He said, and you were not going to kiss my ass. And everybody else was.
Mr. Rogers.
Mr. Rogers. That's what he said. I said, no, I'm not. I'm a diva. I'm a singer. I'm out there. I'm doing my thing just like you're doing yours. And I think that's part of what turned him on that way. He saw that my commitment was equal to his, for his children, for his ministry. I too had a ministry. I too had an audience. And I felt anointed to be walking in that direction. That's what I shared with him. I'll come over there, but you know, I have my own stuff. Don't get in the way. And so we got very close after that. And I can remember he started teasing me. Officer Clemmons, this was after I became Officer Clemmons. Officer Clemmons, are we interfering with your career? And everybody would laugh. I was so mad at him. I said, Fred, be quiet. Stop using that. Stop telling everyone what I said. Nobody else was there but you and me. And they did tease me about it. But I was secure at that point, and I knew that was his way of teasing. And frankly, I liked it because everyone kept saying, you told him what? That you would be glad to be on his program as long as it doesn't interfere with my singing. He was saying, we're interfering with your career. That was my career. I had other little things. And I got my Grammy for Porgy and Bess, and I was traveling all over the country. But I was always winding up back in Pittsburgh with Fred Rogers. It wasn't like an everyday job, but it was a steady one that would come a couple of days every month. So that was my main the job that I could depend on. And other things I built around that. I didn't want to miss any filming, any programs where he wrote a text for me, you know, a libretto or a script. And so it became very important. And I'll never forget one day I was at the Metropolitan Opera. I don't know who was singing. I'm going to say Leontine Price was doing Aida or something like that. And I usually dress up. I mean, when I go out, I don't wear jeans. I own a pair of jeans, but I don't wear them when I'm going to the Metropolitan Opera. So I dressed up, you know. And I got over there at Lincoln Center, and I went inside, and someone said, Officer Clemmons is here. I had no idea that I was so transparent. Is that the word? So they could obviously, that they recognized me and stuff, because I was used to being kind of quasi incognito in New York. There's so many people and so many actors and actresses, and they're all struggling and everything. So I didn't feel that I was pushed out there or anything. Well, my idea, when I came up the aisle for the first intermission, they swamped. I had, why didn't you tell us you were here? Why didn't you this? Why didn't you that? And for the first time, I guess it must have been after the intermission. And I was standing there signing autographs at the Metropolitan Opera. Now, Leontine is singing, but I'm signing her autograph. Mm. These people. So they announced over the loudspeaker, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to make an announcement. Officer Clemmons from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood is here. Would you please give him a warm hand of welcome? So I stood up. Oh, it was thunderous. I said, Lord works in miracles, mighty ways, mighty ways. And up here now in the state of Vermont, I can't go anywhere. I've lost my privacy. And so I do stay at home a lot. I like staying at home, but it's if I go to the hardware store, if I go to the recording store, bookstore, if I go to Hannaford's, which is a grocery store, I can't get out of there in less than 2 hours. Everybody is stopping. They got something to say, or they saw this, or they heard that. And I go with that in mind. Now, I don't fight it. I say, okay, there are people who need to communicate. And that's what I'm supposed to listen to. So, but that's what's happened. And since the book has come out, people told me, we ride by your house. Are you ready for that?
That tends to happen. You helped to break a lot of ground, as well as the Neighborhood did simultaneously. It was a very pivotal time in American history. And of course, now looking back, you were one of the first African Americans to have a recurring role on a kids' television show. When did you know that there was magic in the Neighborhood? When did you know that there really was something very unique, really such a beautiful soul signature, if you want to call it, to the Neighborhood? Was there a specific instance? Was it just like or was it a series of events that just kind of built up into like a snowball effect of love more than anything?
Yeah, I think it was a series of events, and I couldn't separate what happened in the studio from what was happening in my personal life with Fred, because Dr. King was killed in '68, and the night that he was murdered, Fred and the organist called me up and said, we're coming over there to get you. I lived in a place called Shenley Heights, and I always say it's the bougie, when the black people who got doctors and real estate agents and architects and all that, that's where they lived. And I lived up on the third floor in an attic apartment. And Fred, from my house, I could see downtown area called the Hill District, and the fire, the smoke. They were burning buildings. They were so upset with this murder of Dr. King. And all over the country, there were riots. Newark, Philadelphia, Boston, Chicago, every city, every major city had these stupid riots. The thing was, it was so suicidal because they were destroying their own neighborhoods. And I used to say that to myself, why destroy your own neighborhood? Because you're pissed off. Let's do something, but that's not what I'm gonna do. But I can understand, I'm very happy. There was a little bit of me that was afraid what was gonna happen. And if it did happen, where could I go? I did not have family and stuff in Pittsburgh. I'd only been there a year. So when he called, there was a part of me that was deeply grateful. This man is something else. He's looking after me. So I got myself a few things in a small piece of luggage, and he and John came by, rang the doorbell. I went downstairs. I was ready to go because you could smell the smoke and you could see the fire, the lights that were, jagged down there. Something was going on about 5 blocks from where I was living. So I went home with him and I stayed about 2 weeks. And that was one of the first. So when you talk about what was happening in the studio, that was an important thing, of course. That's where it began. But then he really became my protector, my surrogate father, my mentor, and helped me with so many things. And I began to understand that I could talk to him about some of the things that were deeply troubling, and I had never had satisfaction in working them out. Like, for example, feeling like it was partly my fault that my parents separated, and I had nothing to do with it. But a young kid thinks that. I carried it with me a long time. I wonder if I had behaved a certain way, how would they have stayed together? Would they have stopped fighting? It was totally youth, naive youth, still that I carried around. And then I mentioned to Fred about wanting to mother a child. And we talked about, he said, be clear on what you're thinking and what you want to say. Because you're nurturing a child. I said, yes, but I feel different. How do you feel? I said, I want a child in my womb, which I don't have biologically. But my feeling towards children was always, and still is, maternal. And we talked about how he felt with his family, but he never wanted to have children. So to me, that was a critical understanding. You understand how I feel then, because I was satisfied with myself as a male. I wasn't going to change. I'm not a trans, but I do feel this femininity. And what I discovered is that femininity that I was feeling carried all through my creative work. When I was singing and rehearsing and practicing for a play, a musical, or whatever, I began to realize that the part that I was sharing was feminine. It was not masculine. How do you know that? I just know. I felt like a woman doing it. And I used to listen to the operas, Madame Butterfly and Tosca, Aida. I always identified with the female protagonists, the characters. And so I was talking to Fred about that. And I said, I'd love to have a child someday. He said, well, you can, you know. People adopt, they have artificial insemination, there are operations, there are fertility clinics where you might meet somebody and you want to work it out. And friends sometimes do it on their own. I know some who did. And I never did that. But that's when the little boy knocked at my door and I began to feel that this is what I felt and this is what I want. And it just happens to be one of those kids, which I think is unfortunate. He was so neglected. And I didn't like that part. But he needed someone, and he became my first cosmic son.
The bond of love that you had with Mr. Rogers could very easily have been strained.
Could have been what?
Could have been strained. In your book, you share, and it's become obviously public now, that there was a specific time frame where you went to an establishment and
gay house dancing.
Correct. And obviously things were a little bit different then than they are right now. Kind of if that happened now, it might just be like, okay, you know, that's no problem. But obviously Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood had sponsors such as Johnson & Johnson's, Sears Roebuck,
Heinz 57.
Heinz 57. Where we are as a society, even though there's obviously still oppression and people can still kind of look at, you know, lesbians and gay people still in a little, maybe not in that full open light, but we've definitely made progress from where we did beforehand.
Oh, we've made significant progress. Look at how many states have marriage now. You can, two of the same sex, just that alone, which means we're talking about it publicly. And a lot of times when I was growing up and going through that, you couldn't mention it. You absolutely could not mention anything about being gay. Nothing. And so I didn't have any role models. That's one of my deepest losses, a sense of loss. I didn't have anybody to pattern my life about who was gay. And I felt children, boys nowadays need one. When I write this book, they're going to say, I know a successful gay man who came through. He did not get defeated by these rules and these de facto segregation and what have you. I stuck with it. I put my shoulder to the plow. I put my burden on my back and I headed down the road. You know, we all have difficult things that we're called upon to do. I did not want to bring, I've said this too, I didn't want to bring shame to the race. So I was not going to ever again do anything that was public. And I didn't want to hurt Fred, a man who was giving me the fatherly love that I deeply, deeply wanted, and other things. And I thought, I don't want to hurt him, so I've got to find a way of letting this go. And I ultimately came to the conclusion to get married, but she was my best friend. I was with her all the time anyway, and my mind was saying, well, you know, if you have that warmer feeling about a friend, maybe it could turn into an erotic relationship where you could have intercourse like a married man, a married couple. Well, we stumbled around. Only thing I can say with that, it was simply not meant to be. So after a couple of years, I told her that I was not happy in the relationship. It could not be fulfilling for me. So I knew it was not fulfilling for her. And she deserved better. That's what I told her. You deserve better. And through that process, we basically lost our friendship. But eventually, we were able to communicate. But she didn't want anything to do with me. And I don't blame her. I don't blame her one bit. And so when I wrote the book and when I've done other sharings about it, I make sure people understand I do not hate her. She was not a bad person. And both of us were so stupid and young that somebody should have said, wait just a minute. Why are you getting married? And what do you feel for her? I honestly thought it was something you could grow from inside. You could become more and more straight because I loved her so much as a person, as a friend. And so I thought that could turn into conjugal love, but it did not. And so somebody's helped me, and I, moved into another apartment. And oh boy, that was a difficult time in my life.
On page 205 of your memoir, you're very open in saying that he was giving me inspiration and stardom, but telling me now that there was a cost. Obviously, when you were in that room and there was other people that were present, and
one man, George, was there, his lawyer.
Yes. Did you, there were probably a million different things that were running through your mind, because it was a very traumatic experience.
It was shocking.
But Fred was there. He kind of obviously saw, the neighborhood thing, but he was still there, and he didn't leave your side. What did that mean to you, knowing the fact that, yes, he had to look out for the program, but he's even now, then at that moment, he saw you truly for who you were. He saw you for love, not for a label.
Yes. And he assured me that I would always be in his life. Those are the kinds of words he said. No, you're not going anywhere, and I'm not going anywhere. You can't do this for this reason. I'm telling you why. But you're still going to be in my life. We have made that commitment. And that was, you see, at that time, I still had this feeling that white men, particularly, who were like the high alpha on the food chain, would not ever commit to a black man the way that Fred committed to me. Why? Because they considered themselves superior, and they didn't consider us worthy. And there was no tradition in this annuals of Washington or wherever, with George Washington and all that. There was sex, but there was no commitment to a black man. So culturally, I had picked this up, how white men treated me, how white women treated me, how white girls treated me. But the men could be cold and brutal. So I kept asking, why is he doing this? Why is he so caring, so uniquely there for me? And he told me he was going to be there. And I asked him a couple of times. He said, watch me. You just watch me, Francois. White men do make those kinds of commitments, and I'm not the first one. He said, I know why you feel the way you feel. He was very understanding, but his ultimate response was, you just watch me. I say in the book that he talks the talk and he walked the walk. He did. And Joanne too, she was right there. She was always right there. I'm so blessed. That's what I feel. There was anguish and sadness and with my parents and my stepfather, but then you get Fred's heart opening to me like that. The love was so wonderful. And it gave me a new life, a new reason to be doing what I was doing. I feel I had backup. I had daddy back there. And I know people have this every day. They have a good daddy. They should. Every person who's born should have a good daddy and a good mother. Every single person. But they don't. And Lord, heaven knows I did not. And so when he started talking with me, something up here and in here. And I kept analyzing. I was constantly wondering how far he would go, what might tick him off. I was like an adolescent because I never had the experience. So my whole attitude, in my opinion, was very, very young. Very young. And he was tolerant. He was so patient. You have no idea. He was so patient.
Patience and trust are two of the virtues, it seems, that he very much taught you. This is, which, by the way, again, for those of you who are just tuning in, episode number 9 of the Empowered Publicity Shining Star series. Our special featured guest here this month on the program here in our neighborhood, Dr. Francois Clemmons, Grammy Award-winning singer, of course, one of the beloved cast members of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Feel free to purchase your copy
Oh, yeah.
Memoir on Amazon or your favorite bookstore of choice. Indeed, if your local bookstore is open, feel free to support in the process. While on Amazon, feel free to leave a 5-star review for Francois. We could probably spend hours alone just talking about the memories of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, but if you could encapsulate when you look back on the neighborhood, whether it be your favorite moments on the neighborhood, you know, it's one of the things that, you know, at the end of something, whether it be at the end of someone's life, at the end of an experience, one of the things I feel, Francois, that we always ask ourselves is, how did this make me feel? Or how did that person make me feel? It might just be a collection of sorts of things. So really, it may seem to a certain extent challenging to encompass, you know, 25, nearly 30 years on the program into, you know, 2 or 3 minutes for your response. But when you look back on the neighborhood, what were some of your favorite experiences and what are you the most proud of?
Well, when I look back, because that's what I was going to say, it took me a couple of years to add it up, to analyze what I had done, what contribution had I made. And it always fell back to the point when I was so pissed off with down in Nashville and Atlanta and Houston and Dallas. They were throwing chemicals in the city swimming pools. And I was enraged because I knew what those chemicals could do to your flesh. I thought, and they don't care. It's a ruthless, brutal thing they're doing. And I shared that with Fred. I said, can't you do something about it? I didn't know what he could do, but I was flailing under my frustration. And that's when I said, just relax, Francois. All of us are trying to figure out how to contribute. And I'm sure there will be a settlement of this. You don't have to, you know, go crazy. It's going to be taken care of. Well, 2 weeks later or something like that, he gave me the script to our time in the little waiting pool. And when I read the script, I thought it was 0. Come on, Fred, let's call somebody an MF. Let's get out there. You know, let's pick it. I had a lot of energy then. I do not have it now. And I understand why Fred didn't have it. But anyway, so we sat together and we talked. We used to talk about Peter, Jesus, the prodigal son, Elijah, Jacob, you know, biblical heroes. He loved to talk about the Bible, and so did I. So we would discuss those characters and their characteristics and what it must have been like in Old Testament and the New Testament. Well, so when I got this, I thought, Fred, we have to do more than this. This is not enough. He said, well, you just wait. All right. So I went on, got dressed and what have you, and we started filming the scene. And in the middle of the scene, when I looked down and saw how brown my legs were and how white his were, his toes and everything, I began to understand. Only a little bit, because it took me a while of him talking together with me and explaining to me that the statement I'm making, Francois, is that Black people can have friends with white people can have friends with Black people. There's no difference in our humanity, none whatsoever. And doing some of the things that they're doing is just foolishness. And I refuse to, essentially to acknowledge it. I'm doing something, but I'm not talking direct, I'm talking to everybody. This is how you treat a neighbor. This is how you treat someone that you care about. And we should be caring about everybody. So we go through the scene. Then as we get, I say, okay, I've got to go back to work, blah, 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 blah. And he passes me the towel, but he held on to part of it. And as I was drying my feet, he helped me. And he had never said a word about helping me. Also not about it being his towel, because in my mind, both of us would have had our separate towels. But the point of that intimacy, a real daddy with a real son, that's how I look at it. It also reminds me of Peter and Jesus in the Last Supper when he washed his disciples' feet. But just as much as that, it was, hey people, this one is mine. You got it? We are together, we are one. He was saying that also. All that nonsense that you guys are doing, cut it out. It has no place. Nope, not that. Let's do something else with our time and our creativity. We're having a wonderful time, and that's the way it should be with everybody. I had people tell me that they were in their home fussing with their parents about racism. And their parents were saying, stay away from them, you know, they're this, they're that. And that show came on, and that man, he's a man now, told me the discussion stopped in his house. Everybody sat down and they watched it. And he was young, like 7, 8 years old. He said, Mom and Dad, Officer Clemmons is dark and Mr. Rogers is light, but they still care for each other. So I'm not going to be a racist. That's what he said. I'm not going to be a racist. And his parents never discussed it with him again, but he told me this. He said, that was the end of racism in my family. It was that definitive. So I didn't realize that it had gone out over the land that way, because I too was young. And basically what I focused on were those mean guys putting the chemicals in the water. I was so angry. I didn't realize all the good on a certain level that it was doing. And Fred did. As he's been dead almost 20 years. And I've had a number of people come here to my house, and we sat and talked, particularly theologians and ministers and magazine editors for like the Presbyterian Life or the Episcopal Life or the Unitarian Life, all of them. And I tell them the same thing. You must tell white people the truth, because there are people sometimes who turn their backs on everybody who ever tried to help white people. They turned on them and took over their land, took their minerals out of the land, took water if there was some special, whatever. Somebody's got to tell them, stop. Everything does not belong to you. The land does not, don't put a fence around it because it's not yours. You're always putting up a fence, telling the natives, you can't come in here anymore. They've been coming in there 5,000 years. And someone has got to say, that ain't us. We are one. We have always been one. You came from us. There are all kinds of anthropological and archaeological digs that they've done where they see the skeletons are black. They have an Africanness, or they're in Africa, the Old Dubai Gorge or someplace. White people, you are one with that. That's where you came from. What is this nonsense? Because that's what it is, nonsense. And I'm so grateful that I never felt any racism, no prejudice. So that's not on my table. I just never had time for it. I like people. I got seduced at a very young age. And it was not about color. Now I know things that black people do that are jazz, spirituals, gospel music, blues. I know what we're doing, but that doesn't mean that we're innately better or less than somebody else. We're all one. You know, I feel all this stuff that's going on with the virus and with the economics and relationships to different countries and the environmental issues, that to me represents a huge cosmic change that's going on this earth. And this is me, who told me? I think we're going into outer space. I don't just mean flying a rocket up and back. We're going to go and spend time. Lots of people are going to go and spend time in another location. In order to do that, we need to be united. Not just America. America, China, Russia, Kenya, South Africa, Australia. We all need to understand there's only one species on this earth, and it's human. Because I have a feeling there could be some conflicts up there. And the way that we survive as a race is that we are working together.
In one of the earliest episodes of The Neighborhood, I was actually watching Won't You Be My Neighbor earlier today in preparation for our time together tonight. It was a black and white episode, and Henrietta Pussycat, I believe, was talking to X the Owl. And I'll paraphrase her words. She said, I want there to be peace in this neighborhood. And as you alluded to, and with what we're seeing right now in the midst of the coronavirus, this kind of comes full circle to page 5 of your book, your memoir, where it says that we all must learn to rise up and start over again. So the question that I have for you, Francois, obviously, you know, you are in your own way. You have blazed your own trail. You're continuing to do so. And in a certain respect, you're also keeping Fred's memory, his legacy, his life. And people always in times of strife, chaos, drama, struggle, war, poverty, you name it, Fred was there. And people are now maybe more so than ever before turning to Mr. Rogers for words of solitude, comfort, peace, reassurance. What do you feel are some ways that we can restore peace in our neighborhood and also rise up and start over again, but this time do it from an open heart?
Well, that's you said what I would have said. I know Fred probably would have said it also in his way, but you have to have love on the table. Unconditional love. It's the foundation. Forgive me, I'm not trying to convert anybody to Christianity or anything, but that which is divine is love. At the core of it is love. And if you're going to pretend that for some reason you have some parts of that in you or whatever, you have to find that love and you have to live it. You can't just say it, you have to live it. And I feel that we make the decision that we are going to love. We make the decision that we are going to work out our difficulties peacefully. I've done it, so I know it can be done. Sometimes you have to bite your tongue, you have to bite your hands or something, but always you must start with unconditional love. And people must understand, you're not being asked to do that anymore. It is a commandment. And that's the thing I think I've been able to say when I've been traveling. Nobody's asking you how you feel or what you think we ought to do. You have it. Love the Lord your God with all of your mind, your soul, and your might. And love your neighbor as yourself. On these two laws, you hang all the rest of them, the Gospels and what have you. It's all about love. And if you're not loving, sit down until you can get that together. You're not ready. You're not ready. I contend that one of the reasons our president, I won't call his name, he's not my president, behaves the way he does, he didn't get enough love. I know what it feels like not to have love. And whatever was going on, I feel his parents threw money at it because he always thinks about money. He's planning stuff back there behind everybody else. It has to do with money. And that did not serve him well.
No.
No. No. And when I prayed, I was surprised a couple of years ago, right after he got elected, I started praying for him. And I said to myself, why are you praying for that dumb sucker? I said, you know, that's what I'm called to do. I am called to stand and bear witness to the unconditional love of the universe. He deserves his share as much as anybody else. And the only way he's ever going to change, he has to feel loved. You won't win him over by discipline or beating him up or whatever they're going to do. The thing is, I think they're going to take his chocolate candy away from him, and he won't have that anymore. He won't be in the White House. But he still will not be well because he doesn't behave like an adult man. He behaves like a child. There's nothing wrong with children being children, but there's a whole lot wrong with a man acting like a kid. All this hoopla, and he throws out some kind of bright toy to distract you, and then he's doing something over there. I've never followed that toy. I look at him and see, what are you doing? I've been around too.
I feel that as you alluded to, you know, if there's anything that we can really do right now is to really all unite together and to unite together as one, and to, yes, pray for Donald Trump. And, you know, we'll see what happens from. We're beginning.
Please pray for him, because prayer changes things.
It does.
I'm a living witness. Pray for him. The real prayer warriors, when I put stuff on my Facebook and all that, I remind them, you have already come to that point. We have to bring along the weak ones, the ones who fell off the side or whatever. They're going to have to come through too. And you're going to be responsible because you recognize it. You know how sick they are. So there's something you can do. First thing, you don't have to go down to Washington. You don't have to vote for him, but you should be praying for him.
We are beginning to wind down our time with Grammy Award-winning singer. Of course, one of the beloved co-stars of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, joining us here in our neighborhood at Empowered Publicity and the Shining Star Series, Dr. Francois Clemmons. And feel free to head on over to Amazon.com and purchase your copy of Officer Clemmons, a memoir. While there, feel free to leave your 5-star review in the process. Again, courtesy of our friends and neighbors at Catapult, who have been doing an amazing job ensuring. Look at this. This is what happens when there's two open hearts. There's two fantastic books here.
Man.
When we had David Newell on the Shining Star series several months ago, he was very open in saying that he talks to Fred. He talks to Fred as if even though he's not here in this earthly realm anymore, he talks with them every day. I normally don't assume anything, because you know what they say, when you make an assumption, you make an ass out of you and me, right? When you, you've already alluded to it throughout the course of our time here together. How often do you talk with Fred, and how is he speaking to you now, more so than how he spoke with you? Has that bond really become even stronger? As he's communicating with you in a little bit of a different way, more openly, more powerfully than before?
Yeah, we've talked about that. He doesn't have any physical limitations like we do. So the essence of him is what I'm talking to, and the essence is showing me that he's more loved than ever. And the basic feeling is that when I have a problem, I could just sit and be quiet, and he will come. My great grandmother comes. Sometimes I have a house full of helping me with certain problems, and I find that I'm very much aware now that there's a passage from what we are to where they are, those who have gone on ahead. But I also have come to a very strong understanding that this is a very, very, it was always meant to be temporary. This is not who we are. I've taken ownership of the spiritual side, and I recognize that I was something before, I'm this now, and I'm going to be something later on, whatever that is. I do not believe in death the way I was taught as a kid. I'm not afraid of it. I'm certainly not acting foolish and killing myself off before my time. But I'm very much aware, because when you meditate like that, you realize there's stuff before. It's not just happened in April when I was born. There was a whole lot. And once I got a grip on all that, time is not the same when you're speaking about spiritual things. It's just not. So this beginning birth is not, it's just when they had to push you out here, that's how you came. But that being born and dying is just an interruption of the greater picture in life for each and every one of us.
In terms of your looking back on everything, there's still so much more that you're yet to do. And when we talked about it before our conversation officially began tonight, and many people who are our listeners, our viewers, our friends, our neighbors, they're connoisseurs of children's books.
Mm-hmm.
And I just love how everything comes full circle in life. So here you have this beautiful memoir that's out, where you poured your heart out, talked about your whole entire life. And now, in a different light, you're going to be nurturing children's minds, hearts, and souls once again. This is a twofold question for yourself. Obviously, for those who are tuning in, say, oh my gosh, Officer Clemmons is turning into a children's author. How amazing is this? We want to learn more about what's to come. Could you share a little bit about that, and really what this will feel like for you at this particular point in your life, knowing that this is really a wonderful bookend in terms of your work on the neighborhood with Officer Clemmons, and then the work that you're stepping into as a children's author. Could you talk about that with us here in our closing moments?
Well, I feel that it was there a lot, because I always loved looking at children's books and the colors and the drawings and all of that. I love the picture books. I've always been drawn. So I'm not surprised when I was up at Breadloaf, which is the summer writing colony they have here in Middlebury. I was up there and I was working on scenes for the Officer Clemmons. And somewhere in there, I started thinking about my grandfather. And I thought, little Buttercup is trying to tell me something. So I got quiet. And all of a sudden, some of the kinds of things that we went through seem to be very, very relevant. This is something you need to tell them also, Francois. And right in the middle of all of my busy preparation for my classes and stuff, little Buttercup got a hold of me and would not turn me loose. So I sat in the library writing, and I was just totally absorbed now. I came home, and these stories started coming to me more and more and more and more. Technically, I have written 5. The truth is I have outlines for 10. I began to just sit down and think and it was like it poured out of me. It's the easiest writing I've ever done. It just poured. And then I went back to struggling with the memoir and the book on Fred and stuff. But Little Buttercup, I love him. He is the essence of who I am. He loves me. He's always loved me. And he's taught me to love him. He has.
Yeah, I actually wanted to share this in our time together. I'm not sure if you ever saw one of the funniest comedies probably ever. It's a very underrated comedy. Steve Martin, Martin Short, and Chevy Chase in the late 80s had a comedy called Three Amigos. And there was this.
I saw that with the big umbrella, the big sombreros, the hats.
And there is a song that they sing called My Little Buttercup.
Oh.
And it's this wonder. They're in this like Mexican cantina where like there's like the Mexicans that are looking at them are thinking that they're probably way out there, right? And then when I actually read your book, I'm like, wow, like it's so interesting how things manage to come full circle.
Yep, I love the name. I was my great grandmother and grandmother called me Buttercup, and my grandfather did too. But up until I was in school, they called me Cup. Hey, Cup, come over here, boy. Cup. So I like that. And so some of my friends up here, Julia Alvarez calls me her Little Buttercup. And so I have friends who use it, but not very much. Some of my cosmic children also call me Daddy Cup, Buttercup, Daddy Buttercup, Diva Daddy. And, but it just seemed to be such a deep need for American Black boys to see and read positive role models. I did not have them. I had Black Sambo. He was not the answer. And so I always was wondering, how come they don't have more stories that have Black characters and what have you? It could certainly be integrated. Hello, little baby. You come to see Daddy? You come to see Daddy again? All right, you sit down. She comes and she wants a treat. So you have to wait, okay? You have to wait, okay? So about Little Buttercup. So I wrote them, and that's what I first sent to Elizabeth when I was looking for an agent. It was for Little Buttercup. And she read them, and she said, oh, I just love them. Let's talk. So we started talking. And I said to her, well, now, if you look at Little Buttercup, then she made some suggestions, and I was working on those. I said, well, I've got this memoir. Would you look at it? Oh, she said, well, all right, send it to me. I did. But that wasn't the first. The first contact was Little Buttercup, which she liked. And we're renewing our efforts because we feel the time is right now.
Well, we're going to be sharing in the comments below how you can stay connected with Francois online and via social media, as he is very active. Two last things that I did want to mention. I believe that it was now the late James Lipton, the host of Inside the Actors Studio on Bravo.
Oh yeah, okay.
Very big in the theater community in New York, and he would always ask a question that if you believe in heaven and you went to the pearly gates, what's the first thing that you want to tell? I believe it was St. Peter at the pearly gates kind of thing. I still believe that, again, that you've got a lot of love to give, and you're not going away anytime soon.
Not soon.
When you do see Fred again, what's the first thing that you want to share with him when your essence meets his?
I've actually thought about that. And I'm going to tell him, you done good. You set me up right. And you can always have that feeling inside, Fred, that you did one absolutely fabulous personal thing right. You gave it to me. And I've been able now to give it to my cosmic children my cosmic grandchildren, because you gave it to me. Thank you.
And could you indulge us with a little music? It's actually interesting because, you know, you and I have an affinity for someone who was very akin to Fred, and that's Dr. Wayne Dyer. In terms of you know, I credit both Mr. Rogers and the work on the Neighborhood as well as Dr. Wayne Dyer for in many ways and instances saving my life. But there's a beautiful PBS special that Wayne did. I think it was for his Wishes Fulfilled book, and he had the San Diego Children's Choir come on stage, and they sang Amazing Grace.
Oh,
I don't probably have people that have come to you and said, "Can you sing A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood?" Or there are many ways to say I love you, and those are classics, tried and true. But something leading into our conversation, I feel that there's a lot of healing in your voice and a lot of healing in our conversation in the Shining Star series interview here at Empowered Publicity. Would you indulge us with a little bit of Amazing Grace, if you could, from?
Yeah. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound was great that taught me, Lord, now I was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but see.
So beautiful, Francois. Thank you for sharing your voice. Thank you for sharing your mind, and thank you for sharing your heart and soul, not only with us today here on the Shining Star series here at Empowered Publicity, but for your many years of service to children and to the inner child within us all. And I know that I shared this in our first initial phone conversation that we had with one another. Several years ago, I was struggling in different instances and ways in my life, and I had asked God, I'd asked my grandmother, the special connection that I had with my grandmother, similar to how you had with your grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
I said, Babcha, God, I'm asking for a gentle, nurturing, loving, compassionate, authentic, masculine role model who could help me with my realignment, who could help me to balance my masculine and feminine parts of myself, and to really help me to move forward fully in my life's purpose for the children. And be careful what you ask for, because the universe always gives that to you. This has been very grateful for our time together, and you'll actually get a kick out of this, Francois, because this will kind of give you a little bit more inspiration in terms of your work as a children's author. For those who are just being introduced to the Neighborhood here at Empowered Publicity. Oh, there we go. Talk about
the baby.
This is
hello. Say hello.
Your dog's name, Francois?
Princess.
Princess. Hi, Princess.
Yeah. Say hello.
Thank you for spending some time with us here.
Yeah, she's been down there begging.
Princess, we're almost done. Sure that we're just going to be talking about a couple of amazing children's books. If you are new to the Empowered Publicity family and you love the work that we've shared here with Francois, and you're learning more about what it is that we're doing, some of the work that we really love to do, especially for the children of the world, ties into our work with the Empowered Publicity Children's Book Spotlight Series, which airs every Monday evening at 7 o'clock Eastern, 4 o'clock Pacific on Empowered Publicity's official Facebook page, and our Storytime with Mr. Jonathan series, which airs every single Thursday evening at 7 o'clock Eastern, 4 o'clock Pacific, where we share a brand new children's picture book and tie in the valuable lessons of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. So this forthcoming Thursday, one of our favorite neighbors, Alicia McBride.
I love your win.
Alicia McBride,
I love the purple.
Who we're going to be sharing her brand new children's book, I Love You When, and we're going to be sharing Mr. Rogers' valuable lessons on unconditional love. And
Yes.
while you are learning more about the Empowered Publicity Children's Book Spotlight series and Storytime with Mr. Jonathan series, this is Meet Sheldon the Hope Monster, Francois. This is one of our latest children's books that we've had the blessing of sharing. Episode number 76 of the Children's Book Spotlight series and episode number 5 of the Empowered Publicity Storytime with Mr. Jonathan comes courtesy of the Hope Monster, best-selling children's author and the creator of the Faith, Hope, and Love series, Rebecca Yee Peters. And again, episode number 77 of the Empowered Publicity.
I love your win. I love the purple.
It's beautiful. Color of royalty and color of peace. And episode number 6 of the Empowered Publicity Storytime with Mr. Jonathan. Both now available. You can, of course, stay connected with us at empoweredpublicity.com, our official website. You can also stay connected with us on social media, on Facebook and Instagram at Empowered Publicity, and on Twitter at empowered_PR. To all of you, our friends, our neighbors, our listeners, our viewers, our shining stars, let us not forget this particular gentleman. Of course, he's been watching over us over this beautiful conversation that we've had here today. But Mr. Rogers reminds us from the other side that you are perfect, you are whole, you are healthy, you are complete, you are loved just the way that you are. That I like you just the way that you are, but we never fly solo here at Empowered Publicity. The Children's Book Spotlight series, the Shining Star series, as well as the Storytime with Mr. Jonathan. So, of course,
you're a busy man.
We love you.
143
means that I love you, but from Francois and from myself, from our hearts to yours, 243, which means that we love you.
All right.
So somehow we're all going to be getting back in this trolley together, and we're going to be spending such wonderful time together throughout the month of June as we keep counting down to the 6-year anniversary celebration of Empowered Publicity in the month of July. So we appreciate all of you spending some time with us. This has been such a delightful chat and such a pleasure to be able to spend time with Francois. One final time, courtesy of our friends and neighbors at Catapult, which is such an amazing publisher and such an amazing name of a publisher too. The brand,
I agree.
Officer Clemmons, a memoir. It is now available. Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, your favorite bookstores across the country and around the world. If your bookstore does not carry Officer Clemmons, a memoir, you don't necessarily have to demand it, but just kindly, gently say this would be a great book to carry in your stores. Why not? And while you're on Amazon, feel free to leave a 5-star review. And for all of our friends and neighbors as well in the Kid Lit community, show your support for Francois in the coming months and the coming years ahead, because he's very much going to be giving from his heart in an even more beautiful way, similar to, but yet differently from what he did on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
Oh, absolutely.
So we appreciate, again, all of your free time. Thank you very much for all of us who are also now new subscribers of the Empowered Publicity YouTube channel. We want to thank
I'm glad we finally did it.
Yes, me too. If this interview, if this message has inspired you, if it's brought healing into your heart, if you feel that it needs to be shared with someone in need, feel free to be able to share our conversation that we had here on the Shining Star series on Facebook, Twitter, any of your favorite social media platforms of choice, Instagram, the list goes on. And again, thank you very much for all of your support, especially for the children across the country and the children around the world. And in the words of one of our other favorite neighbors, Ram Dass, at the end of the day, we're just all walking each other home. So until again, Until we meet again very soon, friends, neighbors,
Sure.
listeners,
soon.
viewers, shining stars.
Yes.
Jonathan
Very
Masiulionis
soon.
here at Empowered
Woof, woof.
Publicity for Princess, for Officer Clemmons. Thanks again
Thank
for
you.
spending some time with us here today. Enjoy the rest of your May, and we'll talk to all of you once again very soon. We've got a beam of light to catch.
Thank
Take care.
you. Bye-bye.